We hear a lot about implicit, unconscious, or conscious bias. And I think a lot of what we used to refer to as sexism or racism are sort of encompassed by the term now being used of implicit bias. Maybe that's because people are a little more comfortable thinking, well, everybody has a bit of implicit bias in them, so maybe it's not so bad, while people were really very, very hesitant about talking about racism or sexism. So I think there's a lot more discussion. Many of the issues that we've talked about for years and years really comes back to that bias. And my thought is that I like to phrase it all as dealing with stereotypical traditions that people are exposed to early on, and that we really have to overcome the stereotyping and the traditions that people are raised on or develop. One of the best reports, I think, in my view, about leadership for women and women succeeding in academic medicine or in academic careers or in science, in engineering and math, was a report that was done by the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine a number of years ago. There was a former president of Harvard University who made a comment in a meeting about women in STEM, and he raised the question about whether or not women didn't excel in math and science because they lacked the innate ability to do so. And of course that stirred up a storm, and it wasn't just here. I shortly after that went to a conference in Europe and had guys in Europe asking me, what were we doing to respond to this guy? Do we really believe that? No, we don't believe that. We lack the ability. But to respond to that in an unemotional way, the National Academy sponsored a committee to look at these issues of women in academic careers in science and medicine. And Donna Shalala served as chair of that committee. And it included a number of really prominent women and men. And the name of that report was Beyond Bias and Barriers. To me, that's a landmark report. And that report was the first one to document things like people always saying if you hire a woman in science, she's going to give you less time because she's going to be out with family responsibilities. The data was collected that showed that was not the case. Women may be more apt to be out because of some immediate family responsibility, but men in the long run are out more and work less and retired earlier. And the bottom line of that report is one that I have stuck with and I think is really key to the situation and hasn't gotten as much attention as I think it should have. And that was that there's no problem, I'm going to just put this in straight out street language if you will, that the problem is not with women's ability. The problems really lie in organizational structures and institutional hierarchies that have been developed and sustained in years, built on the male model. And that many of the things that are taken for granted, such as Saturday morning rounds or late evening meetings, when in fact you may have to get your kids off or do something else. And so women don't achieve, or women are given all the students to counsel while the guys think they're going to do the hard science. And I'm exaggerating a bit here, but there are examples of that. And so the bottom line from this report was, it has nothing to do with women's lack of ability. It's the system in which women find they have to function, and it's not always in their favor. And I think almost everything, if you look at programs that have been successful, really deal with changing organizational structures and changing attitudes, getting back to what I think, again, is, and my bottom line is overcoming these traditional stereotypes and recognizing that people can function. One good thing is that the National Academies is now doing a follow-up to that Beyond Bias and Barriers report. But that sums it up, bias and barriers. And barriers, there are lots of barriers we can talk about. Talk about the glass ceiling, you can call it the cement ceiling. You can talk about racism, sexism. You can talk about institutional structures and organizational things. But it all comes down to barriers and comes down to bias.